Wait, say that joke again and we'll act like we get it.
You know.
Hello and welcome to Saving People Queering Things, the supernatural rewatch podcast where we assume everyone is at least a little gay. Today we're exploring season 2, episode 22, All Hell Breaks Loose part 2, through the theme of free will. Joining me this episode are my new fellow co-hosts, Elayna, Noah, and Sam, as well as returning crowd favorite special guest Hana. Welcome back, everyone.
Woohoo! Hello.
Yay.
Whoop whoop. Missed y'all.
It's great to have everyone here. This is I think the largest episode we've ever done. We got like 5 of us here today. It's a big roundtable discussion.
Well, I'm told all hell is breaking loose, so that seems appropriate.
So before we get started, let's go around so everyone can reintroduce themselves with their name, pronouns, and what is your typical spot in the car. My name is Abigail. My pronouns are they, them, and I generally find myself either in the driver's seat or in the front passenger seat, depending on who I'm with.
Fair enough. I'm Noah, he, him pronouns, but I typically am the driver. If not the driver, then I'm directly behind the driver, calling out really annoying guidings about what they should do.
So my name is Elayna, and my pronouns are she, they, and my typical spot in the car is not in the car, and it's on a bus because I don't even have a learner's permit. So I don't spend a lot of time in cars, but when I do, I'm usually somewhere in the back seat because I don't do the driving.
Hi, my name's Hana. My pronouns are they, she, / whatever you'd like to use for the day. My typical position in the car is if I'm not driving, I'm absolutely sitting shotgun. I have a special talent, sharply honed skill for doling out the fast food to everyone in the car, making sure the driver is, accessing it appropriately. Dictating music, making sure everyone is getting heard, because I think it's probably something about control. Noah can probably speak to that.
I was gonna say, yeah, I can definitely speak to that. She definitely has a problem with control and music, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine.
Spoken
Spoiler
like the
alert.
second oldest.
If you haven't been around in a while.
Hannah's my sister.
Yeah.
We have the whole thing. She's my older sister, but it's great. She only got pulled over once because she was listening to Hamilton with no pants on.
You know what?
Oh my God.
But you know what? I haven't totaled a car and given me whiplash. So what are we gonna say?
So we're about even.
You're about even.
About even. I can't.
I'm so glad he didn't ask you to stand outside of the vehicle.
Point out there is context there, I swear.
Oh, there always is.
Fantastic
but
context.
It's more fun when we don't know the context.
For the full story, tune in to our bonus episode.
I'm Sam, pronouns she, her, and I'm also often the driver, but if I'm not the driver, I am usually squished in the middle seat of the back seat because my little 5'3" self just, always gets put there.
It's one of the distinct differences between you and Sam Winchester is size. That's the drastic difference. That's the real difference here. It's the size.
Yeah.
It's like you're a pocket-sized Sam Winchester. It's great.
Yes,
You probably could
exactly.
fit in regular
Fun
Sam
size.
Winchester's pocket.
Unsized, less trauma, hopefully.
I would take you over Jared Padalecki
Yes.
any day,
Oh,
Sam.
Amen.
Any day.
I mean,
Any day.
we're going there.
Well, thanks.
That's for another day.
Now it is time for our series recap. So here is what you missed on the road so far. Noah, do you want to take it away with our season recap since you are newly caught up on all of season 2?
Well, yeah, so I've just watched all of season 1, all of season 2, basically all in a row. Intense. It's a lot.
I can count you in. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okie dokie. So series so far, Sam and Dean, 2 brothers who love each other so much so that they'll hunt every type of supernatural being on the planet. They'll kill everything as long as it's causing harm. Sometimes they fight about whether or not it deserves to die. Anyway, they're supernatural hunters. Their father dies, sacrifices himself for Dean. Sam has a lot of powers because he was like fathered by the demon basically, and then they fight a bunch and Sam dies, gets stabbed in the back. It's tragic and Dean loves him. That's it.
That was beautiful. Pure poetry.
Iconic. I love the setup of the framing of the whole show, you know, the significant relationships, and then the speed through season 2, just like
I didn't touch on the FBI at all. Oops.
It's the FBI.
No biggie.
I loved watching the time tick down on that as I listened to you, and I was like, where is he going with this?
It's me looking down at my notes I made and then looking up at the time and being like, ooh, skip those parts. It's fine. Move on.
every time.
And then Abigail, do you want to do one as well?
Yes.
All right, let me count you in. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so the yellow-eyed demon killed Mary, killed Jess, is wreaking havoc, probably has this big plan. Sam has apparently been fed demon blood as a baby, so they're hunting him down. There's a bunch of special children, but they're supposed to do this like cage match to the death, and one of them's supposed to make it out, and they almost all die, and then there's one that gets the jump on Sam because Sam refuses to kill him, and then he stabs Sam and Sam dies in Dean's arms.
Oh, the feelings.
A lot of feelings.
Fantastic. Nicely done, Abby. Now moving on to our episode recap. Hannah, you got anything ready for us?
Locked and loaded.
Okay, whenever you're ready, I'll get the timer up on the screen and count you in. 3, 2, 1.
Fresh on the heels of Sam dying in Dean's arms, Dean ends up making a crossroads deal to bring him back to life. The caveat is that Dean only has 1 year of life left. With Dean freshly by his side, they team up with Bobby and Ellen. Turns out that the yellow-eyed demon is using the demon children to cross an iron gate built by Samuel Cole to open a gate to hell. At the last moment, John comes out and holds the yellow-eyed demon long enough for Dean to kill him. And then they have to decide what happens next with all the demon army.
Fantastic. Honestly.
The master of the 30-second recap. Every time.
Legend bullshitter here. You're welcome.
That was unparalleled awesomeness.
Nicely done, Hannah. Elayna, you want to give it a shot?
I will give it my best.
No pressure. 3, 2, 1.
So Sam has died and it sucks and it's really depressing and everyone is sad, especially Dean. Dean is very, very sad and angsty. And so he tells Bobby to go, and then he ends up making a really stupid deal with a demon who's like really flirty for no apparent reason other than I guess she's a demon. And then he brings back Sam, and then they find out, oh no, there's like a secret devil's trap made of iron and Samuel Colt stuff. And they go to it and they open it and it's a damn door to hell. And then they unleash that and kill the yellow-eyed demon, and Sam gets mad at Dean. The end.
I appreciate the subtle Ellen quote right in there.
Yeah, I love it. It's a damn door to hell. Like, I don't know if y'all heard me, but I literally said it out loud.
You had the twang. You had the little twang.
Yeah, it's a damn
Just a little
door.
bit of that Texas flavor.
Love it.
Sam has unfortunately had to leave us after our 30-second recap because of some unexpected circumstances. So she will be joining us on a future episode very soon, but that's why you won't hear her in the rest of this episode. Just wanted to let you all know. It's now time for this week's theme discussion. And since this is a season finale, we are going to be talking about this through the theme of free will, as we did in our season 1 finale as well.
Consider this theme our very own Carry On Wayward Son to usher you into a finale.
Oof, that recap hit different.
Didn't it though?
Yeah, anyone have something they want to start us off with?
I can throw something out. I think both the season 1 finale and the season 2 finale, looking at them through the theme of free will, involving a crossroads deal to save one of the brothers' life, is a really interesting commentary on how free will keeps coming back to old trauma, right? Bobby really makes the point to Dean that he's like, do you really think so little of yourself that you think this is your only option with your life? This is what your life is worth, versus, you know, John thinking so little of his sons that he's willing to sacrifice himself to make sure they get the yellow-eyed demon. Just really an interesting commentary on how the choices we make are still informed by the people we've been, but also allow us to like make choices that seem kind of wild and unexpected to those people. Yeah, I don't know. I think making a crossroads deal at the end of both seasons is a really interesting tie back between the family lines.
There was related to that, there was a parallel that I noticed too, when just thinking about the season 1 finale compared to this one is the fact that they're both about a devil strap, basically. But with this season, you're dealing with the same problem that you dealt with in season 1 at the finale, which is a devil's trap, but you're dealing with it on this like 100-mile scale. It's basically this moment of you're dealing with the same conflict at a bigger scale. And I think that that was a really nice sort of throwback to that finale.
Sort of a note saying that things are going to escalate even more from here.
Well,
this is just a stepping off point.
And we've been saying that since the season 1 finale. Like Bobby said back at the end of season 1, he said, storm's coming. You boys are right in the middle of it. This is a really, really good example of like raising the stakes. In season 1, it was largely about their individual family. And now it's actually about, a much larger scale of now there are 100, 200, maybe more demons that have been let loose. This is the beginning.
And doesn't Bobby even say the same line? He's like, I hope you boys are ready, as like at the very end. It's just this really nice callback.
Yeah, Bobby like recognizing the stakes and identifying them, and sort of like Bobby's role is interesting in both of these finales for that reason, because he's a little bit separated from the personal narrative. Like he is connected to them deeply personally, but he's what happens to him is not really, like, nothing really happens to him in this episode. He's an observer, and like he makes comments and he knows the lore, and that's like his primary role in these 2 episodes. It's really, really interesting.
There was one point that I also had that's a little bit off topic from that, but it was something about free will that I noticed, is that this kind of whole episode sort of hinges on Jake's free will, which is something I never really noticed before, but it's him making the decision, because he has that moment where he has the gun in his hand and he can just end this before the door gets opened, before any of this other terrible stuff goes down, but he is being manipulated. And I think that kind of ties into this weird element of the yellow-eyed demon not allowing them to have free will, because he's literally hacking into their brains basically and talking to them and manipulating them in their dreams. And so it's sort of this, like, the yellow-eyed demon is kind of removing their free will in a sense, but Jake is still the one who at the end of the day has to make the choice to do it or not, and he does. And so that is what leads us to all of the events at the end of the finale.
It's sort of like the Frankenstein paradox, right? And I say this, I don't know if this is an actual thing. This is just an argument I had with my mom, I think, in undergrad. But, is Frankenstein's creation responsible for all of the poor choices that he makes? Or is Frankenstein, the doctor, responsible for the poor choices of the creation that he put together and then abandoned without any idea of what was happening, right? Sort of this, Jake has been put in this terrible position. He's been brainwashed and manipulated and altered on a molecular level across his life, and then put in this terrible situation. I think something that was really interesting in the episode prior, right, was that decision both he and Sam had of, am I going to kill you when I'm told that that's the only option, but I can choose to like remove myself from the constrictions of this situation and make a different choice. And I think, Elayna, you make it really clear, right? This really does hinge on his free will. He's acting as though he has no options. And then the very moment he does, right, is he's handed the Colt. Like that's that's the crux.
And he has this whole, what a surprising turn of events. Like, I love the way that he says that whole line.
Yeah.
I almost think that that's the moment the yellow-eyed demon really solidifies his control, because the thing that stood out to me was that the thing that changes it for Jake, like he makes the decision based on the threat that the yellow-eyed demon puts. He says, like, I'm threatening your family, I'm threatening the people you care about. But the thing that he actually dangles in front of Jake at that moment of decision is the possibility of like something for Jake. He says,
yes.
He says, oh, you're AWOL, the military is not going to take you back. Maybe you can get your old, it's kind of implied, your old crappy job back, or
money and honey, health and wealth, ice
power.
cream Sundays.
There's like a strong implication that like he will make Jake powerful. And that's the thing that he uses to like ultimately draw him in, and that's the thing that Jake's decision sort of ends up hinging on. But yeah, like you said, Hannah, the real question is Jake really even free to think clearly through that option when everything up to that point has been manipulation and threats and the designing of Jake's life to make him the perfect soldier for the demon?
Yeah, when he hands him that gun, it's very reminiscent of that moment in The Dark Knight Rises when like Bane puts his hand on the guy's throat and he's just like, do you think you're in charge? He's giving that moment where he's putting the thing in his hand so he feels like he has the power, but he really doesn't because of the way he's been manipulated.
It's an illusion.
Yeah.
It's an illusion of power. And he needs Jake to have that illusion of power because he needs Jake to be committed to this. So then when Jake gets up to, even like Ava said in the previous episode, once you give into it, there's all these things you can do. And Jake says the same thing when they get up there and Sam and Dean and Ellen and Bobby are like confronting him. He says, like, once you open yourself up, you have no idea what you can do. And I think the demon needs him to be fully bought in, not just complying out of fear. And he needs his free will to be bought in, and he manages to do that.
Yeah.
That's another reason the demon's happy that Jake won rather than Sam, because Sam wasn't that far in. He didn't start learning new powers and whatnot. Jake bought in a lot more already, and I'm not saying that's his fault.
No, I think if this is flipped and Sam's the only one that survives, I think it's a very different sort of scenario, because if Sam and Jake fight, but it goes slightly differently and Jake is actually, that blow that knocks Jake unconscious, if that actually is something that kills him and he survives, Sam survives, Sam's still not going to be bought into this mission. Sam is still going to, if he follows the demon at all, he's just waiting for the moment when he gets handed the gun and he's not hesitating.
Well, because the demon has on his side the fact that Jake, prior to these events, doesn't know about the supernatural and doesn't know about the demon. He doesn't have personal beef with the yellow-eyed demon, aside from, you just made me kill these people, which is terrible, sure. But it's a very new and fresh wound to him. He hasn't known about this his whole life, whereas Sam was literally raised to specifically hunt down this particular demon. And he knows that if Sam wins, he's going to fight it a lot more than Jake would, because he doesn't have that experience knowing what the yellow-eyed demon is capable of.
Can I tie this to and call me out if this is out of left field or not applicable, both to theology and to abuse tactics?
Always. You can always.
Amen. That is such a good tie-in.
So please do.
I'm right. So the first comes to mind, right, is in terms of abuse tactics. And I'm speaking as somebody, I'm not even going to qualify that. Right. It's really consistent in abuse situations. You sort of have this frog in a boiling pot situation, right? Things escalate slowly over time. Nobody really asks to be in an abusive situation. It's something that happens to you. And I think what you're talking about is so interesting in terms of this, how he's bought in. Because one, I think you have with Jake this slow escalation of you slowly are allowing other people, you're realizing that other people are dying, you're allowing other people to die, you kill someone, you decide to make a choice or to do something so that other people don't die. And then you make the active choice to participate because of what it means to you, right? There were all these situations where control really wasn't fully there. He didn't actually have power. And then after he's made all of those choices in situations where he doesn't have power, the one moment he does, he's already been so overcome and so structurally powerless that in that moment, it is still so much more beneficial to him to make this choice than to try and stand up for any of the ethics as we as viewers who aren't in the situation would have or would want him to have, right? Which is such an interesting, then you making the point, right, that he has no context about the supernatural. He does not have the benefit of all this understanding, this larger context. He is one man in this really weird fucking situation where he's making poor choices in just a terrible situation. And that really puts to mind to me how people are manipulated. I've done a lot of weird cult readings lately and how people are slowly bought in, and not to
very true,
right? I mean, honestly, and not to diss religion at large, but at least in fundamental Christianity, this also strikes a note in my childhood of, that's why you learn theology, right? That's why we teach you doctrine. That's why you do catechism. That is why you learn all of these rote answers, so that you recognize the situation when the devil is manipulating you. And I don't have a clear thought of how much that connects, but just the way that you guys were talking about that, I was like, ooh, hang on. I really feel that.
That's a fantastic connection.
I think that helps, because one of the things that I was feeling in this episode, particularly about Jake, was there's two kind of things that are happening. There's part of the narrative that's painting him as a victim of this situation. And then there's that turn where all of a sudden he's very villainized, and it comes down to those things. But I think framing it in the context of manipulation and abuse tactics is really helpful, because I think ultimately we do want to see, I think it is the most accurate to see Jake as a victim. one who makes choices.
Yeah, he made a terrible choice.
Yes, he makes a terrible choice at the end there. But again, inside of that situation, every step that has led up to this, and we know from what the Yellow-Eyed Demon has been saying, the number of times that we've met him, going back to season 1, he was manipulating John. You know, when we think about manipulation, he is the one, you know, when he says to John at the end of season 1, he says, you know the truth about Sammy, about all the children like him. And then what does John immediately go and do? He goes and tells Dean, if you can't save Sam, you have to kill him. He's been pulling the strings of all of these characters. And it just, because Jake doesn't have any other information, Jake is particularly susceptible to this.
Yeah. And I won't say how because we don't want to spoil things, but I think it's really interesting to talk about this idea of him pulling the strings and how much of this behind the scenes stuff has been happening in the lore and in this universe, because you find out later on like how much deeper this rabbit hole goes. Like really, this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg, but you know, it's already, the demon is made himself so ingrained into their lives, even the people that don't really know about him until they start showing these powers, that he's able to manipulate them for maybe the time that they're 6 months old. I mean, they didn't ask for this, like they didn't ask to have to deal with this. So in that way, they are, every single one of them is a victim because they had this enforced upon them and inflicted upon them. But at the end of the day, the free will comes back in because all of these people make a choice. And in that first moment at the last episode where Sam has that choice to kill Jake, he doesn't take it. And I think that says a lot about Sam as a person, as opposed to what Jake ends up doing, because he's kind of just like, once he gets back on his feet, he's ramming a knife into his back and he's like, screw you.
I think that is a good segue, because I really wanted to bring this around to Sam, particularly when we want to talk about free will and destiny, because this like entire season has been about, what's Sam's destiny? Is Sam good or evil? What is it about Sam that makes him one of the special children? And does that mean he's ultimately destined to go dark side? And we've talked about that in almost every single episode of this season. And it's really interesting to see that play out now. We saw that Sam, even confronted with the worst possible scenario, would be looking for a way out, would be looking for an alternate option. And we see the consequences of that in this episode, where we see he pays the price for that, for not going with the plan, not going with what the Yellow-Eyed Demon wants. He doesn't fight to be the victor. And that actually leads into a point I wanted to make, which is that like, if the season 1 finale is ultimately, we talked a bunch about it being about Sam's free will, like the episode sort of hinging on that, this finale hinges on Dean's choices and free will.
I actually have a tie-in to that, a note that I made that's perfectly sums up kind of, I think, what you're getting at here. There was something that I noticed, and it's something I really never noticed until this particular viewing. And I think it's because as I was watching, I was thinking free will, free will, free will. How do I tie this in? But the one thing that I had written down was that during Dean's whole speech to Sam when he's, you know, still dead, is this moment of him saying how much he was fighting for Sam to have his free will as long as he could.
Ooh.
Because he's like, you know, Sammy, like you always kept asking, you always wanted to know, and I was trying to keep that from you. And so you've got on the opposite side of where the Yellow-Eyed Demon is manipulating Sam for very selfish reasons. Dean tried to keep a lot of this stuff from his brother because he wanted him to have options. He wanted him to have the choice to have a life outside of hunting and to have a life that wasn't as terrible as Dean's was, basically. And I think that was just, that hit me so hard when I was thinking about how, you know, you've got the Yellow-Eyed Demon who's tugging Sam in this direction, and Dean who's tried so hard to let his brother just live his life. And that's why I think the fact that Dean says, you know, in that whole speech, it's like, I failed you and I let you down, and how could I do that? And it's so gut-wrenching for that reason, because he was only ever trying to do what was best for his brother and to give him the life that he deserved. And that moment, just he's realizing that he let him down, and it just breaks my heart every time.
Elayna, that destroyed me. That you're absolutely right. And I felt that like a gut punch.
When it hit me as I was watching the episode, I stopped and I was like, oh no. And I just immediately started typing on my phone. I was like, I need to document that I've had this thought while watching this episode, because it ripped me apart. But it's so,
You're right.
Dean just wants what's best for Sam, and
You're right.
he fights so hard for it, and he uses all of the free will that he has in his power to make sure that his brother is okay.
Which was none. He had like nothing left, and he gave it all to Sam. Fuck.
And that's the thing, that's the crux of his character too. And one thing I noticed that I've never noticed before in this episode is when he's talking about Sam being his responsibility, he says, Dad didn't even have to tell me. It was just always my responsibility. Like, he doesn't attribute his protectiveness of Sam to, it's not ultimately about the fact that John said, you got to look after your little brother. It's ultimately about like, Dean's just fundamentally like, no, this is something I chose. I chose to be all in.
He wants Sam to know that Sam deserves Dean to care about him, even if it wasn't a chore he was given by their father. Sam deserves Dean's attention and love.
But how heartbreaking is it that he can't say that when Sam is alive? He says it to him when Sam can't hear him, because
Go off.
Even then, even in death, he cannot let his brother truly see how much he's given for him and how much he's sacrificed for him, because he doesn't, even though he sees it as a hurt for himself, he does not see anything that he's done as being something that like is Sam's fault. He loves his brother, and that is why he does everything that he does.
Yeah.
And so just that speech to him is so gut.
I think he recognizes that how much it'll hurt him, whatever he does, but as long as it's to protect Sam, it doesn't show up as a cost in his mind. It doesn't matter. He's going to do it. It's going to hurt, sure. And he's aware of that, but he doesn't care how much it costs as long as Sam is safe and fine.
No, which makes sense. Like the fact that this is a couple of days, I've always definitely seen that as like, he's just sort of psyching himself up to do it. Like, he knows very quickly what he's going to do. I think that those 2 days are him processing that and coming to grips with it. And
do we know that that's how many days it was? I actually didn't realize.
We know it's been some time. I'm not sure exactly how much, but we know it's been at least a little bit of time.
Yeah, the Bobby's like, don't you think it's time?
Yeah.
But I also feel like if it had been more than like maybe 2 days or so, Sam would have been rotting a bit more, which is terrible. But
yeah, so I looked it up. I can't tell. I don't know how long Sam was dead for. It's unclear in the wikis. But
damn, wikis.
Regardless, it's enough time that they are able to get to a place. Like, Bobby leaves, goes and gets food and comes back. This town is in the middle of nowhere. Like, there's some time where Dean's contemplating what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Which was the main point I was making, is that like, this is not a snap decision. Like, it is, but it also isn't. He's also had all season to think about this based on them knowing about John and what John did.
It feels like at the very least a day, but no more than like 2.
Which makes sense, honestly.
I think it also makes sense in terms of how the fuck did Jake get to Wyoming?
Yeah.
That also is important. Yes, exactly. He does have a car.
He has car, and
It's true. He's shown with the
He has to
car.
get a car then.
and a
Then he has-
campfire.
So it's at least probably a 24-hour period we're looking at. 24 to 48-hour period.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum 24 hours, maximum 72.
My favorite instance of a funny time moment in this is that he makes the deal with the demon and then gets back like immediately. I was just like, how fast did you drive, Dean?
Yeah.
How far was the nearest crossroad?
Well, he arrives just in time. Sam was like checking himself out in the mirror.
So
Yeah.
there theoretically could have been a bit of time in between when Sam is just,
And you could see, like, say 5 minutes for him to wake up and like come to his senses, 10 minutes for him to pee, because like obviously he has to pee because he's been dead for 2 days maybe. Yeah, he's got to pee.
You're asking the
that.
real questions, Noah.
Then he comes back and he's like, whoa, checking himself out in the mirror. So let's say 30 minutes to the nearest crossroads from Dean's. That's not bad.
that timeline actually works, I guess.
You made it make sense. It's less fun that way.
One note that Sam did leave with me in terms of this episode was about Bobby, which I think is fitting that we talk about Bobby a little bit. He just again pointing out that Bobby is really fatherly in this episode, and that Dean is comfortable sharing his true feelings, and even like, you know, raising his voice. He like physically pushes at Bobby, and Bobby doesn't respond the way John has responded when Dean has pushed back. Like when Dean pushed back against John in season 1, John would push even harder and even more violently. With Bobby, Bobby is kind and responds with like a ton of empathy and understanding, and doesn't like push Dean beyond what he's willing to do. You know, he says, we should take care of Sam's body, and Dean's like, no. And Bobby's like, okay, you know where I'll be. You know, I'm
Bobby understands he's going through a lot of trauma right now and doesn't push him further. He waits for him to adjust and says, hey, this is what I think we should do, what I think needs to happen. Whereas John pushes him further, pushes the boys further every time into the trauma.
Because again, for John, it's about the mission, and it's about the, in a lot of ways, it's about like, you know, their destiny. John doesn't really fight the free will. Like John's not really concerned with them making free choices. Is, you know, like the trajectory of my life was set when the demon killed Mary, and the trajectory of my life now and of my son's lives is that we are destined to now hunt monsters and eventually kill the demon.
Well, one other thing that I thought was nice with Bobby this episode too is how chill he is when Dean and Sam show up. He could have totally blown the cover and just been like, Sam, you're alive, and, you know, thrown the water in his face the way that he does when, you know, that happens to other people. But he just is like, oh, good to see you up. Dean, you want to help me get this stuff from the car? And it just
does so well.
Icon behavior.
Yeah, he has such, and he does that because he knows what Dean did. He knows already. Like,
For sure.
The minute he sees him at the door, he knows what happened. He's already sussed that out. And so when he takes him outside to have that whole conversation where he, you know, yells at him about his self-worth, like all of us would if we could get our hands on him, it's just this way that he treats him with such regard that John never does with him at any point. And it just is so refreshing to see Dean be cared about. I have feelings.
The appeal that he makes to Dean about what he did, where he goes, you know, like, how do you think Sam is going to feel? How did you feel when your daddy did that for you? And I thought, instantly flash back to the scene at the like at Bobby's place where Dean is wailing on the Impala because he is finally acknowledged that his dad is gone. And Bobby, that's Bobby's house. Bobby saw that. That's not a stretch.
I never thought of that before. Oh no.
Bobby knows more than probably anyone, probably maybe even more than Sam, the impact that losing John has had on Dean, because Dean has only really shown that to Sam in tiny slices and has shown that to Bobby. And so that appeal that he makes is so, Hannah?
I'm like trying to think about how to put this into words. Every day I unpack more of the eldest sibling complex.
Don't we all? Don't we all? Oh, eldest siblings in the chat.
As the youngest, I feel I must sit this conversation out.
This is a conversation Hannah and I have regularly whenever we're both on an episode. It comes
Correct.
up.
And Noah, I'm also curious actually to hear your take on this.
So curious. I had so many things written down about the conversation.
Oh my God.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, no. Okay, that's what we're on though, right? Is I think you guys are talking about this, and what's coming to mind for me is, okay, I have this in words.
I would absolutely make a deal with the demon to save your life. Confirmed, Hannah.
Right, yeah. Like, we know this, right? I know
Yeah.
with no hesitation. If one of us died, the other one was like already gone.
Yeah.
There's this thing that happens, right? We're talking about free will. We're talking about Bobby saw the impact of John's deal on Dean. Dean in this moment is making both a selfless and a selfish choice, right? Bringing Sam back, sacrificing his own life for Sam is so immediately he's giving everything for his brother. But what I see in Dean, what I've unpacked in my own life, right, is this idea of like such
a savior complex to the point where you need everybody else to be okay so that it makes you feel okay, because you only feel okay when everyone else is protected and safe.
And your identity is wrapped up in that.
Yes, recognizing that your lack of safety affects other people.
Specifically you.
Yes. Yes.
No, but specifically me, but like in this moment when Sam at the end of the episode is like, when he finds out about the deal, his thought is not, oh my God, you're near death. His thought is, once again, you have given everything for me. And I can't even have the complex grief that brings up because I know you're going to take it as one more way that you're a burden. Dean's absolute blindness to his own self-worth and his deep selflessness because he loves Sam and thinks that he doesn't deserve the same love, in turn blinds him to ever actually truly seeing and accepting that love.
The
Right?
scene
Like,
with the demon gets me every time when he goes into Dean. He says, do you really think that little of yourself? And Dean looks straight at him with those eyes. Jensen Ackles, 10 out of 10 performance.
correct.
Kills it. I looked at that, imagined my older sister doing that. Bam. I was like, it's fine.
We're getting right into it today.
I should point out that one of my notes I had written down was at the beginning of the episode when he's talking to Bobby and he goes, I said I'm fine. And I wrote, I was like, no, you're not. Please stab me.
I think that's I think what both you and Noah have said, Hannah, hits so close because I think that's going to become the new fundamental challenge in their relationship in season 3 is going to be the impact of this decision, because we had it a little bit with John, but John and Dean's relationship was hierarchical. So John giving his life to save Dean was hierarchical and was also strategic because it was also about like Sam. It was about Dean staying alive so he could take care of Sam. Whereas this is a totally different situation because yes, there's this parentified sort of relationship that they have, but there's also just, they are brothers, they are peers, they are teammates in this like fight. And yes, Dean's inability to acknowledge the impact that losing him will have on his family, not just not the practical impact, because he gets that, he gets that like strategically being dead, not great.
Right.
But he doesn't get the emotional impact that like that he would be missed, that their lives would get drastically worse without him.
Yeah.
And that impacts any, like, I don't like, for Sam's sake, but also for Bobby, we're going to see through season 3, like other people that this is going to like impact.
Well, it all comes back to, I think, the line that Sam says to him when they're standing by the car at the end, when he says, don't you think I would do the same thing for you? And I think that right there is kind of like the thesis statement of season 3 is I'm going to do, it's my turn to save your ass for a change. When he says that, like, that's really what season 3 is going to be all about, is finally this moment where this younger sibling gets to be like, look, you've given everything for me. I have to do something for you. And if that is just keep you alive, then I will give everything that I can to do that.
And to say that like that is, that the relationship is just as core to Sam's identity as it is to Dean's, like just as core, that idea of protecting each other.
Yes.
And the idea, Dean says in that moment, he says, I had to look out for you. Sam's like, why did you do this? Like, why did you do this? And he's like, I had to look out for you. Like, that's my job. And Sam goes, what do you think my job is?
Yes.
The way that Dean says what in response to that,
he's
never rip my heart out and eat it for breakfast.
Like, he's never considered this. And like, as an eldest sibling, like, I think, also like Hannah, I've had to unpack my own eldest sibling complexes. And some of it is around like, you take on responsibility and then you refuse to share any of that with anyone else. And ultimately that hurts both you and them and the relationship, because you don't have the ability to be cared for, because you're like so desperate to take that away from someone else. And Sam's like, you know what, I also get to have a job here. He's like, I also get to value this relationship and I also get to sacrifice for it.
Yes.
And don't take away my ability to, he's like, you think I wouldn't do the same for you because I've never been given the chance to show that. And he's like, this is my chance. I'm going to show that. He's like, I don't care what, like, there isn't anything I wouldn't do.
Older siblings need to be protected sometimes too.
Amen to that.
You heard it here.
That dynamic has to be flipped. And that flipping of that dynamic, I love that moment for Sam of like identifying that that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
One of the things I really loved about this episode is that when Dean makes the deal and Sam comes back, Dean doesn't tell him. And I personally was like, ooh, I'm going to try and see what Dean reveals. Like, see if I was Sam, would I have figured it out? And there's a scene where Dean almost says, well, you were dead. What was I going to do? But he doesn't finish that sentence because if he did, Sam would think about it. He'd be like, well, if I was dead, Dean would probably make a deal with the demon and try to get me back, huh? Oh shit, that's definitely what he did. But Dean doesn't say that. He's like, well
nice weather we're having.
Which is also an interesting oldest sibling complex that Dean has. The whole thing of like, I have now made a decision that's the thing of being both selfish and selfless, where he's like, I now can't tell you this decision because if I tell you this decision, then
you won't want me to have made it for us.
Yes, exactly. And I will have caused harm to you by telling you this decision, even though the reason I made it was because I thought I was preventing harm. And in this situation, it's an impossible situation. You know, either Dean lets Sam be dead or he offers his own life to save him. And either of those things screws Sam over. Either Sam is dead or Sam has to live with this weight and the implications of that in terms of their family trauma and what they've experienced up to this point.
So talk about free fucking will. Right?
Okay, that's the first note I had is Dean takes away Sam's free will immediately, right off the bat.
About toxic family structures, when parents and situations parentify children, when siblings take dynamics with each other that they assume roles that are inappropriate and unhealthy with each other,
but not because they're told to, but because
they have to, to create safety, right? And this happens, I mean, speaking from experience, that happens with parentification, that happens in so many different dynamics. But looking at the way I know that you and I relate to Dean's Abigail and the way that this is talking about, like the absolute danger of this and what I've seen and had to unpack in my own life and take accountability for and recognize why it kept me safe, why it kept other people safe, but why it's unhealthy. What I'm seeing in Dean, right, is exactly what you just said, Noah. Like when you cannot allow a relationship to be reciprocal, when you have to be the one who is saving people, the one who is carrying on the family business, Dean assumes every role to keep everyone else safe and does not allow them to assume that, because if he does, they're not going to be safe, which means that he's a failure. Power has to be in his grasp. Control has to be in his grasp. And because of that, even though it's for safety, because of that, he erases Sam's free will. It's that exactly. It's this unhealthy dynamic that is entirely based in love.
Yeah, and trauma.
Love and trauma.
And that's it.
Literally the entire show in 2 words.
Love and trauma.
And that's the thing is like, we are going to see as the show continues that they're going to have to wrestle with the repercussions of that exact dynamic over and over again as the show unfolds. And I'm really excited, Noah, for you to kind of see how that unfolds, because I think we're going to be talking about this in a lot of different situations.
Because this episode is such a point of no return for the series, because up until this point, the whole conflict of the series is kill the yellow-eyed demon, get revenge. And they've done that now. And so it kind of, in a weird way, becomes an entirely different show after season 2.
Yes.
Like those first 2 seasons are kind of their own contained story. And then it becomes something totally different after that in a great way. But it's a very different way.
Yeah. And it's going to force them to deal with this relationship. Is it reciprocal? Can it be? And what does it look like for that dynamic to shift? And I think, both Hannah and I would say like the work of undoing that dynamic is a really, really easy, really time consuming and difficult and takes a lot of emotional awareness that these characters don't generally tend to do. And so they're going to continue to kind of fall into this pattern. But I think it's going to be interesting to see Sam, in this instance, his free will, and not even it is his free will, but also it's not, because the reason he's also in this situation is because of the yellow-eyed demon, is because of Jake, is because of what happened to him in his nursery as a 6-month-old. Like no one gets away with their free will untampered with in this episode.
Truly.
And every character has to then deal with like the choices they make, and the choices you make when your free will is ripped from you and you're scrambling for control like Dean is. You sometimes make choices that have impacts.
even as like a small note, you have that happening even with Ellen, because she's
Yes.
really upset that, you know, she managed to live and everybody else in the roadhouse got killed. And it was because of this, you know, she says just dumb luck. It was this moment where she's just like, oh yeah, let me go get pretzels. It was this innocuous moment that, you know, you think nothing of. It was like that sliding door kind of thing on a subway. Like if you had caught this train, everything would have turned out totally differently. And the fact that she does that, she feels that she's now got to have this, like this guilt and this survivor's complex because everybody else, you know, that was in the building was killed.
Well, but would Ellen be there with the boys if more people survived from the roadhouse? She wouldn't have given them key information that they
That's a good
needed,
point.
right? About the Wyoming situation.
Well, that was,
Yeah,
that was because
that's
Ash
also
was
true.
killed.
Yeah, that's true. Ash had the information and he couldn't have gotten it to the boys. So he had to do it through Ellen, but only after his death.
Yeah.
Do y'all remember, maybe it was just me, don't remember being kids and you were like, I'm gonna get older, if I'll just learn how to do things, and so then I'll do them the right way and I'll kind of have a grasp on life.
I'll figure it out eventually.
Right. Like
Right.
it'll eventually I'll have learned all the necessary skills. And then at
Yep.
that point I just coast. I just do adult things then.
Right. And then I just, you know, boop, I'm an adult. And instead, it's just a series of situations where there's no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Yeah. See, listeners, what you're really getting here is a double feature, because in one hand, you have a supernatural podcast, and the other, you have a therapy session to work through your deeply seated millennial angst. And I love it.
I had a moment in this episode where I was like, because last year when we started this podcast, I was like, oh, I've been watching Supernatural for like a decade almost, like pretty much. And I was like, when I started watching it, I was so much younger than the characters were. And then last year I started this podcast and I was like, I am the same age as Dean Winchester in season 1. And now we're watching this. It's about a year later and I'm like, I am the same age as Dean Winchester. I'm like 4 full years older than Sam. It's a little trippy. And it made me think of that when you said that, Hannah, because I was like, yeah, to be like, oh, this doesn't actually get any easier. It doesn't get any easier to be an adult. And I'm not going to feel
You saying that just made me realize I'm the same age as season 5, Dean, and I'm not okay with
no.
Oh
that.
my God.
Oh no.
Not
Oh,
okay with
no.
that. 10 out of 10 could not handle any of his trauma from that season at this age.
Sam currently is 23, right?
Yes. Yeah, Sam is 23.
Okay, then I'm the same age as Sam currently. So that's where we're at. Well, that sounds like a fantastic transition to our going meta section, where we talk about tracking lore, the Bechdel test, pop culture, and more.
First, we have the Bechdel test, and we do not pass it because we can never have nice things.
Nope.
It passed in seasons 1 and 2. We passed less than 10 times in the entire first 2 seasons. That is 44 episodes. It passes less than 10 times. That's literally all we're going to say about it, because we
Less
are.
than 25%.
Yeah.
In season 1, I made a joke that I later turned into a tweet that we had to re-record because Abigail didn't laugh properly the first time, where I was like, I pass as a woman about as well as Supernatural passes the Bechdel test.
It's a joke. It's a good joke.
Wait a minute.
Damn.
That's my gender identity. That's it right there. So get this. I was looking into the lore for this episode, and we have, as we already kind of talked about, some really excellent parallels going on between the Devil's Traps. And we also have this interesting point. I'm not sure who put it in the document, but I love it. Of what does Bobby know about the demon blood and special children? Because he says there's no way that a full-blown demon gets across that. And it's like, how do you know, Bobby? How
We've
do you
never
know?
met a half demon. We've never met someone who's
Yeah.
like part you're either possessed by a demon or you're not. Like we've
What implies full blown?
exactly. And what does he know about the special children and the whole blood thing?
Yeah, because that's like this interesting point where almost like it's a nod to the audience, because the audience knows at this point that Sam has been given demon blood, but no one else besides Sam and the yellow-eyed demon know that. Not even Dean knows that yet at this point, because when Sam asks him, or when Dean asks him earlier in the episode, right when he comes back, he's like, well, did the demon tell you anything else? And Sam's like, no, he didn't. So it's like Sam doesn't tell him what's going on, so Dean doesn't have that information.
Damn. I also really liked the fact that they used the railroad lines as the massive devil's trap, because that was just such a cool concept. I really like the way that they invoke current technology, or at the time, because the cult guy was way back when. So like at that time, it was recent technology that, hey, why don't I just use these railroad ties as a massive devil's trap to keep everything safe in here? That sounds
Actually,
perfect.
kind of genius. Like it's actually kind of
Genius.
genius. Like hunters, it shows you like also that like historically hunters have been really like, have they been around and they've been smart and they've been like influencing, like they've been protecting communities for a long time.
I really like the concept. Like, why wouldn't they build their base in the middle of that railroad center? That 100 square miles is what they said. That's
Mhm.
so much potential for a town, a massive city for people to live, protected from demons. So I mean, it does get destroyed at the end of this episode. So
Yeah,
after
well,
this,
and
it's
if you're inside it, if the door does get open, they can't
You're
get out.
fucked.
Then you're real fucked because
yeah.
they're locked in there with you. This is the first time we've heard of a door to hell specifically in a really like
That's
in a
true.
concrete, in a way where we like know where one is. And obviously now the devil's trap is busted. Oh, and the one other thing for lore is that we get the information that John climbed out of hell ? And he also disappears in this kind of like flicker of light, which is really similar to how Mary's spirit disappeared in season 1 episode 9 Home. So at this point we don't know where that means John has gone, because like John sold his soul to a demon and was in hell, so he climbed out. Does that mean he is
released from his deal with the demon, or maybe has he fulfilled those terms, or is he out and about? Who knows?
Yeah, questions for the future. Pop culture references.
This one was a pretty light on pop culture references.
Mhm.
I didn't notice too many. They mentioned American Idol at one point.
The yellow-eyed demon mentions American Idol in reference to
Of all people.
Jake being the last man standing.
Yeah, it's okay, cool. So you watch American reality shows
Or
about
the
competitions?
or the person he's possessing has seen it. Unclear.
That's true.
It could
That's
be
true.
either, I guess.
I did like that little bit where the demon popped out of him when John grabbed the demon, and the guy fell down, and his expression was completely different than it was when he was the yellow-eyed demon.
Oh, I didn't notice that specifically.
It was just way more relaxed and just at peace, kind of, which is kind of a note to the actor, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Subtle acting choice, but that contributes.
I just want to add, like, why would we assume that American Idol doesn't take place in hell?
Oh,
American
Idol Hell Edition.
Have you ever seen American Idol on Earth? You don't know.
I've honestly never seen American Idol, so you know what?
Boom.
Or I'm thinking, Hannah, there's a version of American Idol that's just people who are in hell. So it's still they're still all American contestants, but it just
that is actually
is
it's
in
all
hell.
the dead singers who went to hell and they compete. So it's like
It's
DC talk.
Imagine losing American Idol twice, once in life and once in death.
Well, but it makes sense because
over and over again in death.
Yeah, it actually makes sense.
Like it makes sense too, because like people that would do something like win American Idol or get really far on it are probably people that would like make a demon deal to be the best singer in the world,
and then think they're gonna win American Idol.
That's where all those country songs came from.
We had a whole plot line about that in the Crossroads deal episode.
Indeed.
where the musician who had like sold his soul for musical talent. So
not to make an Office reference, but I feel like this explains Andy Bernard a lot.
He could have chose talent.
Instead.
And yet.
bless his little heart.
Okay, that about does it for pop culture.
Moving on into gaydar.
It's not very gay, y'all. I'm really sad to report.
There's not a lot of like sexuality or gender things really in here. The only thing we get is we do get the demon at the crossroads. We get another instance of like a demon aggressively flirting.
It's true. Yeah.
That's like the kind of the closest we get in terms of this topic, this episode. And again, we've established that especially in these early seasons, demons particularly are quite aggressive.
They're so sexually aggressive.
Yeah, very sexually aggressive. We saw that with Meg. We've seen that with the other Crossroads.
Which, I mean, I guess tracks. They're demons, right?
There's not a lot of really other. There's anyone else have any other notes on like gender or sexuality in this episode? I don't think there's much.
It's funny for being, one of our first episodes of Saving People Queering Things. They're really just, it's such a plot heavy, dense episode that there's not really a lot of those moments of exploration for the characters. So
especially because it's such a heavy episode. Like, it's not an episode where we're getting a case of the week. We have a very small cast. In this episode particularly, even more, like the previous episode is a small cast. This episode is a really small cast. And it's mostly just our main characters.
There's no extracurricular characters whatsoever.
No research being done. Like, there's very little research. There's no going to a library. There's no opportunities to really engage with anyone where flirting could happen. So that's about it for this week. We'll come back to that. There'll be more next season.
Listen, season 3. Oof.
It'll give us lots of opportunities to queer some things.
Save some people while we're at it,
So our last episode mixtape for season 2,
Okay, wait. Hear me out though. I think that this one, like this episode, should be Carry On Wayward Son, point blank.
I was gonna say straight up Highway to Hell. So
yeah,
there'll be a place for that.
I was like, I know there's a better episode, but that's all that came to my head.
In this one, they didn't go to hell. I feel like that will happen eventually. So maybe
we're approaching the on-ramp of the Highway to Hell.
Yeah.
I know this, and I was like, that is all that's in my head.
Yeah.
I was gonna go with Little Lion Man from Mumford and Sons.
Oh,
because I think it works for Dean really well in this episode. The lyrics. You're
so
not
good.
as brave as you were at the start.
Oh,
you'll never be what was in your heart.
Damn.
It's fine.
If you'd like to stab me, like here would just get it done the quickest.
Well, my song for this episode is gotta be Today by Sueko. He talks about how he's worried about letting his mom down, who has died in the past, and he's gonna make it up to her, and maybe the day he sees her is today. And so Dean is gonna make it up to his mom by protecting Sammy, by sacrificing himself. Maybe the day he sees his mom again is today.
Okay. Okay, Noah. Well, that's fine.
Well, now I'm feeling things that I didn't sign up for, but whatever. For me, the only song that I could possibly associate with this episode is Carry On Wayward Son, because this is the very first time that we get that as a season finale sound, like lead in. And I just think that it's such a part, like it's so much a fabric of the show is that song and everything that it's about. And to have it as the first time that it comes up in a season finale is just like, I love it. So definitely Carry On Wayward Son for me by Kansas, for any listeners who might not know.
Proud of you. That was a good one.
Thanks, bro.
Wonderful.
I'm gonna go with Glory by Radical Face.
Hannah.
I know it applies a lot of places, but right, I'm thinking about
a Radical Face song.
You know I gotta. Yeah, I know that the story of the song, right, for Radical Face and just his really brilliant couple of albums where he went through sort of this family tree storyline, but it's sort of about a soldier who defects from the army and goes into hiding with his lover, and the ending of the song is that she turns him in and he's stoned to death, so it's not quite as hopeful as Sam and Dean make their ending, but sort of this idea of, I write the opening line as I was born when they took my name, when the world turned wicked when I joined their game, but I turned and fought them like you always knew I'd do. I don't know, I feel like looking at how, Sam has sort of defied expectations, Dean really believes in it, like sort of speaking to this willingness to escape where they've come from together.
I love that.
Beautiful.
Yes to that.
Well, hey, that seems like it's just as good an opportunity as ever to move into our blessings for the week. Does anybody have anybody in this episode they want to bless in particular?
I have one, actually. So usually I always go for Dean because he's my precious nugget and I love him. But I actually really would like to bless Ellen this episode.
Thank you.
Because she goes through so much in this episode, and because what she's experiencing is not central to the story of the boys, it's sort of on the peripheral of the episode. But just to think about, like, she lost her home, she lost her place of work, all of these different hunters that she knew and was friends with, and Ash, who was like a really close friend of hers. That's like
a
one
kid to her in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're so close, and I can't imagine like what she's going through this episode, and it just I think she deserves to be blessed.
I'm just gonna jump in. My blessing was gonna be for Ellen to be put in that situation where she has a gun to her head in her own hand and she still says shoot him, fighting through the words just to say them. Awe-inspiring, honestly. She goes through so much and then pushes further.
Ellen is a queen, no doubt.
Honestly, blessings to her in many forms.
I want to bless Sam. I'm blessing Sam a lot this last couple of seasons, really intentionally. Because he comes back to life and is immediately confronted with the ramifications of why he's back alive. And he's had this massive shift in his understanding of his identity in the last 2 episodes. He knows what happened to him as a baby, and he knows what Dean has done for him now. And we focused a lot on Dean's emotional state in this episode, but I think Sam's emotional state also bears noting, and I want to bless him for just the significant shifts that he goes through in this episode, and the place that he comes to at the end where he's going, I'm gonna take back some agency. I'm gonna be the one to save you this time. Yeah.
Poetry snaps to that.
I would like to bless Jake.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. We talked a lot about the position he was in, right? This delicate balance between his culpability for his choices as well as his suffering and making them and getting there. And I would like to bless him in this episode, and by extension sort of bless everyone who feels like they're stuck in between a rock and a hard place, with sort of the courage and the peace to recognize that they have more free will than it seems, and they have the grace and understanding for how they got to where they're at.
Why do I always almost cry when we do blessings?
Beautiful.
So beautiful.
Same.
So with those blessings, we're going to come to the end of our episode. Thank you so much, Hannah, for being here with us this week.
This was marvelous.
Privilege.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for coming on. It's a genuine pleasure.
No, it really was so fucking nice to be back here. I've missed not only getting to talk about Supernatural, but getting to hang out with a bunch of you. And Elayna, I've heard just so many phenomenal things about you. Getting to see your face on the Zoom call.
Thank you.
Your analyses myself really goes right in the heart pocket.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been lovely meeting you.
We look forward to the next time we have you on in season 3.
Yeah.
Thank you to all of our longtime listeners for exploring season 2 with us these last few months. And if you are a new listener, we are so excited to have you with us as we kick off our next season, season 3, here on Saving People, Queering Things.
New season means it's a fantastic time to make sure you're subscribed to Saving People, Queering Things, wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. So if you've got a blessing you'd like to give to a character or a topic you'd love to see explored, you can leave us a voicemail on Anchor or reach out to us at queeringthingspodcast.com.
You can also, with our name change, make sure that you're following us on all of our different social media, which is TikTok and Instagram, where we're at Queering Things Pod. Find us on Twitter at queering_things. And you can also come chat with the hosts and fellow listeners about the episode over on our Discord server, and links to all of that fun stuff will be available for you in the show notes.
Be sure to ride along with us next week as we celebrate the end of season 2 with our season recap and awards special. Thank you all for coming along for the ride, and we wish you a peaceful road until we meet again.